Oh, Bretto.
What's up, MP?
Damo just called.
Yeah?
He thinks there's going to be 100,000 people at the Wellness Summit.
Oh, again?
He thinks we're bigger than Michael Jackson, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles all put together.
Damien Christoph has gone completely mad.
Did you know he's made 8 tons of forage?
What?
And now he wants you and I to help him get rid of it.
Oh, Damo.
So look, being the good friends that we are, we've asked him.
You mean forced?
Well, we've kind of twisted his arm to make him literally give his forage away to 100 lucky Wellness Summit attendees.
So if you're ready to enrol for our signature 2 days of inspiration, education and empowerment...
And entertainment.
What do you mean, MP?
Well, Australian Idol winner Wes Carr makes his Wellness Summit debut this year, Bretto.
Wes Carr, you'll be guilty.
So if you're ready to be entertained, head on over to thewellnesssummit.com.
And get 4 value bags of forage muesli or 1 bag each of paleo, muesli, bircher and porridge when you register.
Now, all you need to do is register for this 2-for-1 special, bring a buddy, bring a friend, bring a family member or a colleague.
And then choose your forage selection, 4 muesli or 4 assorted, and get 4 bags per attendee. That's 8 bags per double pass.
That's almost $250 of forage for free when you register for the Wellness Summit on August 25-26 at the Collingwood Town Hall in Melbourne.
That's 150 serves of breakfast, almost 6 months of breakfast just for registering for the Wellness Summit.
Well, it's first in, best dressed. These 100 tickets are only available until June 18 or until sold out.
All the details of this special offer, all the topics, featured speakers and more are over at thewellnesssummit.com.
Thanks for making 8 tons of forage, Damo.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today we have a very special podcast with a very special woman, Megan. Would you like to say hello, Megan?
Hello.
Megan is a mum to triplets. And before her triplets, she had has two older sons, one who is now currently 10 years old and 8 years old. And then her triplets who are currently 2 years old. So this is a really fascinating story for us around your journey of a planned third pregnancy that turned out to be a surprise triplets, which then you were given a 100% mortality rate if you continued with the pregnancy of 3 triplets. And it's really the story of, your emotional journey with that, your relationship, the experts and the people that you found along the way to, in the end, birth 3 healthy babies, which is just, we love stories that challenge the status quo. So before we dive into that, I'd just love to remind you to jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe. And once a week, we'll send you an email with wrap-ups to everything we've put out in the world, and you can pick and choose where you'd love to dive deeper. So Megan is currently a stay-at-home mum to 5 children, 10, 8 and 2 years old, and is studying her Master's in Educational and Developmental Psychology. So you already have a degree in psychology, which I was talking to you about earlier, which I find fascinating, and I'm interested to know how that set you up, given the journey that you've had as well. Where we'd really like to start is just the beginning of your story. So are you happy if we just kick over to you just to roll on, tell us your story, and we'll be conversational and see how we go from there?
Yeah, sure. I guess our story starts, 3 years ago now. We had our 2 boys at home and they were in school, and we'd always spoken about going back and having our 3rd child. And me and my husband decided that was the right time. We were really looking forward to it, had studies planned around having our 3rd child and finishing off that degree. Fell pregnant pretty quickly, super excited, and immediately I was just so unwell. I had terrible, terrible morning sickness that I hadn't had with my other 2 boys, and I guess my intuition told me that it was a very, very different pregnancy to my others.
How unwell were you?
I was incredibly unwell. I was vomiting non-stop throughout the whole night, all day, couldn't keep water down.
What were the feelings going on for you? Like, what were some of the thoughts going on in your head around the reality of that?
Well, I just had such easy pregnancies with the boys, and I thought, I wonder what's going on here. Pretty quickly, me and my husband started joking that there was quite a few inside my belly.
Oh, God.
This was pretty much immediately.
So we're talking you're, 4 to 6 weeks pregnant or something like that?
Yes, very early on. It did lead me to go back to my GP and say, look, I've been so unwell. Can we please have a scan? And I did joke with him at that stage and said, I think there's 4 in my belly.
Wow.
And he said, oh, stop being silly. And then another week went on and nonstop morning sickness, very unwell.
So how are you even looking after your older 2 at this point in time? Because that's debilitating to the point of being non-functioning.
Yeah. Look, the boys were at an age where they could get themselves ready for school and were able to help out. I did have one of my son's teachers email me because my son had gone to school and said, Mum has been up all night vomiting. So she checked in to see if I was okay.
Wow.
Yes, I think my boys did sense there was something going on too. And it got to about 7 weeks, 8 weeks, and the GP did send me off for that first scan. And that's when we found out we were having 3.
Wow.
Can you talk us through that scan? So is it an abdomen exam or an internal ultrasound?
Yeah, it was over the belly.
Was over the belly. And
Yeah.
so what are you noticing in the sonographer and what are you seeing on the screen and when did the penny drop?
So she looked very, very young. I think it was one of her very first scans, and she just looked so shocked. And she went silent and then finally announced, I can see 3, and started pointing them out. And I was thinking, oh, there's 3, there's not 4. That's good. And she was just so silent. She didn't really talk until we went back out to the desk to hand the report. She finally said, congratulations. It was the first one she'd seen. And at that stage, she pointed out that 1 was in a single sac and 2 were together and identical.
Wow. And how's your husband? I imagine he was there with you.
No, so I had been to the
on your own?
GP and I
gosh.
just drove straight down to that scan. So
Were you shocked? Were you shocked to the point of, 3, yeah, that's better than 4? Like, yeah, in my head going, what?
I was relieved. I wasn't shocked when I saw the scan.
That's so interesting that you were relieved. So in your intuition, in your head, you've already played out 4 is my worst case scenario.
Yes.
So when you're given the news of 3, you actually have the perfect emotional response. Don't you find that fascinating?
Isn't it interesting? It's just so fascinating that you already had like that worst case, so this was already better than before.
Yeah.
How did you break the news to your husband?
So I was a bit worried about breaking the news, and I got in the car, and I think that's when the shock hit, and I called him at work.
What did you say?
And I think I said something along the lines of, do you want to hear the news? I've gone for the scan. And he said, oh, there's 2, isn't there? I said, no, keep on going. He said, 3, there's 3. And he didn't take it badly at all.
Wow.
Yeah, there was a few jokes about him packing his golf bags and leaving, but he was just joking. He was quite excited.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder how much your sickness leading up to that and you guys joking around this multiple pregnancy thing, perhaps on some level really broke the ice.
It's processing still, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's almost like you had that awareness.
We all knew. I don't think you'd think there'd be 4 in there. I think if you're that sick, you'd be maybe expecting twins. But the fact that so many crossed our minds and we don't have a history of multiple births in our family, and I hadn't felt that way with my previous pregnancies. So,
So you've both kind of taken this news fairly well. You're both on board with it. And so what's the next step after that scan? You obviously went to your doctor.
Yeah, I finally got put in hospital at that point on a drip
Okay.
to try and stop the sickness. And we had to start telling people quite early about the pregnancy at that stage because we needed their support and help. So we broke news to family a little bit earlier than we had hoped to, probably around the 9-week mark. But we were still told at that stage that there would be a really high risk we'd lose one. It's quite common for a baby to vanish and disappear by the 12-week scan. So So
you're in hospital. How long were you in hospital for on the drip? Was that to stabilise you?
A few days.
A few days.
Yeah.
And did you feel better with that?
Not really. No, it stabilised me enough to get back home and on other medications.
Okay. Medications for the nausea?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And that did that help you be functional or not?
No, not really. No, I was still couch bound and vomiting nonstop.
How's your mental space with that? Because I imagine you're quite a capable, get shit done kind of woman.
Yes, yeah, I didn't like resting, and I think at that stage I was more worried about trying to get food into me because I knew I was growing 3 babies and I didn't want them to be affected by it.
Could you keep food down?
Not much, no.
So what did that look like?
It was more fluids that I was trying to keep down, but there was days where you couldn't even keep water down.
Wow.
I can't imagine how hard that is to, in your mind, do you want to eat and then you eat and you are like, oh, that's the worst. Did you kind of go, I can't wait for the time when I love food again?
Yes, because I do love food.
I know that's how you felt.
Yeah, but I imagine I was not as sick as I've had terrible morning sickness. I said to Bridget, I remember this one time going, it's so gross, I can't function and all I want to do is just lay flat on the floor and vomit and potentially even just lay in my own vomit.
I remember the fridge door opening and closing, and even that was enough to just trigger me.
God.
And there was one day I really needed to duck out to the shops to get food for the house, and I learnt I couldn't do that through the rest of the pregnancy because it was just too triggering.
And at this point, how are you feeling about your capacity to mother your older children? Is that hard for you in terms of your role and how that's therefore changing because you're so incapacitated, I suppose?
Yeah, it was a tough time. I was lucky that they were so self-sufficient at that stage. But if they were younger, I don't know what we would have done.
Did you have conversations with the boys about what was going on?
So we didn't at that early stage.
So how did you explain your sickness?
That came down the track after I think we had our 12-week scan and then we went into a bit of detail with our boys about what was happening.
So even though you've changed from being mum who is doing things for them to mum who can't get off the couch, you hadn't had a conversation with them about that?
Not at the very, very early stage, no.
Okay. Did they think there was something going on?
They knew I was sick and unwell. They didn't ask questions. But looking back on it and receiving that teacher email, I think my eldest knew there was something else going on.
And he's got the space, I suppose, with his teacher then to have such a secure relationship to actually have that conversation with her potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that support just moves. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So you're really trying to work out how to yourself survive the days and put in as much as you can into your body to sustain the 3 babies. Do you at any point at the moment think that you can't have 3 healthy babies?
I was worried about the nutrition they were getting. I was lucky that things settled down a little bit after that 12-week mark. I was still incredibly sick, but it was turning into a very long pregnancy and just so emotionally difficult compared to past pregnancies. I'd heard about people who had experienced severe morning sickness, but I didn't quite understand what they were going through until I went through it myself. It's absolutely draining.
So when you say emotionally difficult, what does that mean?
Just that physical tiredness and the feeling of sickness that you just can't stop, you can't control. You are literally couch bound and can't do anything.
What does that do to your state of mind?
Look, yeah, it can get you down, and especially if you're an outgoing person like I was always active and on the go, never one to sit on the couch. And just not knowing how long it was going to last and when it would go away. And I was also a person that didn't quite like taking medications unless I really had to as well. So that decision, I probably went a few weeks without taking the medications as well to see if I could get through it. That decision to take medications as well was a big one for me.
Do you feel like you went through periods of depression at all?
No, I don't think, no, not full depression, but yeah, it's tough not going out, seeing your friends and living your normal lifestyle, yes.
I imagine that could take you to pretty dark places in your own psyche.
Yeah. I always knew that it was going to be worth it and that, you know, by the end I would come out with babies. So I did struggle through.
So what is the medical advice you're receiving by this point?
So our next scan was at 12 weeks and we were expecting to go into that scan possibly not seeing 3 babies still.
How did you prepare yourself to go into that scan and accept that news?
It was really, really nerve-wracking because I wasn't sure how I'd react if there was 2 instead of 3. And we went in and got the scan and he immediately said, I can only see 2. So I think the scanner also had that perception in his head that he'd probably go in and
only see 2.
Go and, yeah.
And was that the 2 that were in the one sack or?
I wasn't sure at that stage.
Okay.
He didn't say. And then another minute passed and he scanned and he found the 3rd one. Sounded quite surprised by that. Yeah, and once we hit that 12-week mark, it was pretty definite that you'd keep 3 at that stage. So we were really excited by that news on that day. And we were sent back to our GP and we weren't really sent off to a specialist at that stage. Our next scan was planned for 20 weeks.
Are you booking into a hospital or anything at this point in time?
There was talk of me needing to go to a tertiary hospital that had more supports, but there was no rush or urgency at that stage.
Can I just ask, with your first 2, did you have vaginal or C-section births?
Both vaginal, yeah.
So with triplets, what are you considering for your birth at this point in time? What does that birth look like in your head when you're going, I'm booking into hospital, maybe I should go tertiary or not? What are you basing the decision off of in terms of what that birth looks like?
I was told I could only go to 2 hospitals in Melbourne that would cater for a triplet pregnancy birth. It had to be C-section. There wasn't an option safety-wise. That was the only way they'd deliver them.
How do you feel about that? Or how did you feel about that then?
I didn't have my mind set on either way.
So you're feeling quite resolved to, we get 3 healthy babies, I'm okay with this decision?
Yeah, definitely. So from there, it was over Christmas and we had a bit of a gap between our scans. But
so you're just surviving between the 12 and 20 weeks. It's kind of life as normal and you're just surviving day by day.
Yeah.
On the couch, still trying to eat and drink as much as you can.
Yes.
Still vomiting.
Yes.
How are you sleeping?
Yeah, sleeping was uncomfortable too from a really early stage. I'd popped out quite early.
Well, 3 babies.
Yeah. It'll do that, I imagine.
Are you trying to resource yourself at this point?
I always had in the back of my mind, it seemed like a really long gap between scans and just the level of care for triplets. I wasn't sure what to expect. And I hadn't been referred on yet. There was a bit of a delay around that. And in the end, I decided to call across to one of the hospitals and I got a lovely, lovely nurse, and I'm so glad I made that call, who stated, come in straight away. You should not have been left for that long. There's some risks around carrying identical babies. So I got a referral and went straight across, and so glad I did, because that's where our journey began, really.
So take us on that journey.
Yeah, so I didn't know at the stage, no one had told us that if you are carrying identical twins or identical triplets, and by that I mean that they're sharing a placenta, so...
Were all of your your 3 triplets sharing a placenta?
No,
because you had 2 separate sacs, so 2 separate placentas.
Yeah, so I had Sophie with her own placenta and her own sac, and then I had Jade and Asher who were sharing a placenta, and they were the concern medically at that stage. So it was the first time we were told about twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, but we were told not to worry. If it happened to our girls, there'd be a laser surgery available to fix it during the pregnancy. So we went home and we're due back again the following week to get another scan. So we're sitting about 16, 17 weeks at this stage. And right over Christmas, I had popped out. I was feeling really uncomfortable all of a sudden. And that was a early warning sign of twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome that we weren't quite aware of. We went into the scan and got a sense pretty quickly that things weren't right. And we had quite a few people come in and do different scans over an hour or so.
Are they talking to you during this process?
No. We did ask if everything was all right, and they said that it was very, very complicated, and they'd take us into a room after the scan and explain what was going on.
So how are you feeling when hearing that?
I was thinking things aren't great. My husband was looking at me quite concerned and wondering also what was going on, and we did stop and ask, and he said they were just trying to map out what was happening and they'd get back to us. We had 2 doctors in the room at that stage. We had our scan and we were taken into a room, and they sat down and explained that our girls had twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome.
So what does that mean?
So it means one of our babies wasn't getting much blood flow. So she wasn't getting much of the umbilical cord or the placenta. And she'd lost all of her fluid around her body. So when you've got a baby in the sac, they're sort of floating around swimming. She was shrink wrapped, so you couldn't really see her at all in the scans. And our other baby, Asha, had too much blood. So she had a lot of fluid, which explained me feeling very uncomfortable all of a sudden. And her heart was under a lot of pressure. So they explained in a twin pregnancy to have that, you could get this laser surgery, which they go inside your belly during the pregnancy and cut blood vessels.
So this is... No, can you explain that to me? I was about to rattle off my own version and I'm like, that's ridiculous. What does that mean exactly? So they're making an incision through the uterus? Or it's through the uterus?
Yes. And they get to the cord and almost laser off blood vessels to make it a bit more even between the 2 babies.
So kind of like amniocentesis, they're going a little bit through, but not into the sac? No, it's...
I think they do go through. The mother's awake and you watch the procedure on the screen.
Wow. So they're sealing off blood flow to the one that's getting too much. Is that what the laser's doing?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And so what does that then do exactly?
So that would increase your survival rate.
Because it evens out the nutrients or the blood flow between the 2. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it would have increased their survival up to about 60 to 80%, with the risk of possibly still losing one of the babies. But the outcome, if you couldn't get the laser surgery, was pretty grim, as you mentioned at the start.
Because we have a mutual friend, my mutual friend had said to me, oh my God, Julie, I have just heard the most incredible story. Do you know there's this woman who was given 100% fertility rate, 100% fertility rate if she continued, and she defied that. I was like, wow, that is a story I want to hear about. So is that literally what happened? Did they say to you there's no hope here?
We had, so all the stats are on these twin pregnancies, but we had additional complications on top of that as well. So the identical twins' cords had both grown into the wall of the third baby sac, so they couldn't actually go in and laser because they would have burst her sac.
Wow.
And everyone would have gone into a premature labour at 17 weeks that they wouldn't have survived. So at that stage, the only solution, and we had the best medical team and they are absolute heroes to this day. They looked after us so well. They were so good in not pushing options and giving us time to decide what we wanted to do. But our only option at that stage was to try and save our single girl, Sophie, and that would have involved a procedure to stop the hearts of Jade and Asher, the identical girls. And that was still a risk because all might have gone into premature labour still from that procedure. So, yeah, that's what we were left with after that scan. And
so what happened when you went home?
I think when the doctor broke that news to us, he was almost, you could see tears in his eyes too, and he said, look, we'll probably see you in a week. You'll probably go into a premature labour from all that excess fluid, and I'll be working in emergency that weekend. I'll be around. And a little bit of me, I knew we'd had our boys and they were very tough, and I said to my husband, they'll be right, they'll be fine. But the doctor said, look, it's not a great outcome. And we went home, and I think as that week went on, I didn't have as much hope as I'd had on that first day. And
because what's coming into your mind? What are you being plagued with that's reducing your hope and increasing your doubt?
We weren't given great odds, and to have additional complications on top of that, we did ask at that appointment if we could. There's about 6 doctors in Victoria that did that laser procedure, and they did meet that week to see if there was any other options. And, yeah, nobody came up with anything else. So I think we're just liking that we didn't have to make an immediate decision. We had time. If they passed, they passed. That was what was meant to be. So we just sat on that decision till our next scan the following week.
And at this point, you're still feeling really uncomfortable now? Like, you said
physically.
Physically?
Yes. Yeah, it's really bloated.
So were you really
extra fluid?
Excuse me. So were you also really calling yourself into resting more, knowing that it was so precipitous? You're on that edge.
Yeah, I did make that conscious decision to rest and to try and look after myself. And I think from that scan, I went into that frame of mind that I've got to try and reduce my stress. I've got to try and rest if there's going to be any hope of getting them through.
In your mind, do you feel like you have to make the decision between one healthy baby or no healthy babies?
Yeah, my husband and I had lots of discussions around that. And when they sat us down, they said, look, there's no good choices here. It's a really difficult situation you've been put in. My heart said to me that I wouldn't want to go through with a procedure like that, but I was trying to think with my head, should we try and save one? And, yeah, just grappling between those two options.
Are you able to talk us through any of those more private thoughts that you were having in making that decision?
Yeah, I think as our journey went on, so we went back for another scan another week and things hadn't changed. And then we went back another week, and by that stage we were getting closer to 20 weeks, and there was also a bit of an ethical dilemma in that if we had to terminate 2 of the girls, we had to do it by that 20-week mark. So although they were great in giving us time, there was a bit of a time pressure in making our decision. I think the thing that made me not go ahead with it was I couldn't choose one over another. and that it wasn't an option to just terminate one of the girls. Both had to be terminated. So we had a few turning points in that one of the scans, one of the babies that was very small, Jade, who was very, very sick at that stage, stuck up her root finger in one of the scans. And I think it was at that point I thought, she's really determined and stubborn. And
Did you take that as a sign?
I did.
Were you communicating in your own way with your babies during this process?
I had formed a connection. I knew where each one, because we had so many scans, I knew which area each one was sitting in my belly, and I'd learnt which one was which. And yeah, I think I was also given some advice to try and picture in my mind the water levels equaling out. And at that stage we tried any advice we were given. And yeah, I think it was through those scans, we'd watch them every week. Just couldn't go through with the decision.
How were the medical team with you at that point? Like, how were they feeling about your desire to continue?
They were so incredibly supportive. They weren't judgmental at all. They said, if you want us to stop the conversations around termination, we will. And I went in each week saying, no, you can raise it. I want to think with my head as well, not just my heart. And they'd go over the same talk each week. They were incredibly good. They got in professionals from other hospitals as well to rescan, just to make sure they couldn't do this laser procedure. So they were very good. I guess the turning point was at 20 weeks. So it was always assumed that Jade, our little one, wouldn't make it through. If she passed, then all the blood flow would go to Asher and possibly give her a stroke. So they were concerned that she'd be, if she did survive, which they were saying weren't great odds at that stage at all, that there could be big complications and that they could pick that up on a scan, but we couldn't change our mind and terminate after that 20 weeks.
So potentially at this point you're thinking it's possible we lose Jade and that Asher has long-term disability?
That was raised as a high possibility. And that had lots of implications for our family and our existing boys and our capacity to look after everyone. So we had a lot to think about at that stage.
How did you do that? Like at home between you and your husband, how are you working your way through all of this information? I'm trying to take myself back to that time, but we were just very open in our conversations, and my husband's priority was always my health. He wanted me around for our boys. And was that ever a concern that you wouldn't be during this process?
I think it was a concern for my husband. It could have, I didn't have those circumstances that placed me at risk, but it could have changed. I was, under hard to breathe sometimes from all of the fluid and 3 babies in there. So I think that was always in the back of his mind as well. But yeah, I was pretty adamant to go in each week and just let nature take its course and not make a decision.
But in not making a decision, you're still making a decision. So how did you have the faith in your decision to keep going? How did you mentally do that for yourself?
I think I just kept on telling myself, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. I had that tiny bit of hope inside me that maybe things would be okay. I knew our other kids were really tough and strong, and I was hoping they had the qualities as well. And another little thing was that they were girls, so girls have a slightly higher rate of surviving a premature birth. And then I finally found a lady in the United States that started a foundation called the Twin-to-Twin Transfusion Syndrome Foundation. And she was the one that gave me a lot of hope. She her boys had twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome 17 years ago, and she lost one of her boys but had one survive. And she really talked me into that there's still hope, try and go through with the pregnancy. And she linked me into a medical professional in America who contacted me straight away with some advice. And
what was his advice?
He told me the importance of bed rest. So he said, go on immediate bed rest, lay on one side, have a really high protein diet.
What were his? Do you know what the reasons were behind that advice?
So I think it does help. It's a bit of old school advice, but it's supposed to try and help the blood flow. And
so lying on your left side?
Yes. Yeah.
And the protein?
The protein, I think, helps boost the placenta and the blood flow as well, from my understanding. I don't know if that's 100% correct. It's a bit controversial in Australia, but I thought at that stage, why not? We given no other hope, might as well try it. So I sat and sipped away very slowly on sausage and drinks all day long for about 10 weeks. And I haven't touched a sausage since.
Sausagen, for those who might be into international and don't know, is essentially like a protein kind of drink that that is used widely here in the hospital system for rehabilitation of various sorts.
Yeah. So
100% bed rest.
Yeah. I got up for little things like the toilet, but I put myself on bed rest. It wasn't the advice over here.
So in Australia, that wasn't the advice?
No, it wasn't.
Why was that?
I think there's also risks in going on bed rest, in that you can have clots or so they do encourage a little bit of activity during pregnancy over here. So
how did you weigh up those two options in your mind?
I thought we were given an option where there was no chance of survival, no other option. So why not give it a chance? Why not give them a chance? It can't hurt them. So, I did that. And
how is your family functioning? So you're on 100% bed rest. What is happening around you to make your family function? Because you still have 2 kids in the mix of all of this.
Yeah, had amazing kids that became very independent very quickly, made their own lunches, and my husband was still working because we had to try and save that leave for if the girls were born at that stage. And we had amazing neighbours and amazing school mums that would all come around and clean, and that was hard for me, stepping back and not doing things, but I really made myself sit on that couch. And we were so lucky to have incredible people, some that we'd only just met and got to know, all came around and cleaned my house and helped out.
The power of women and community.
God. Yeah. And online shopping. I became a good online shopper.
What are you filling your hours with in bed rest? Are you tired? Are you sleeping a lot?
No, I wasn't sleeping during the day. I was too uncomfortable and sick to sleep, but I was watching a lot of daytime TV that I'd never watched before. I was bored at that stage. I really was. I struggled with that stage. But I was lucky that I had people popping in and lifting my spirits, keeping me
I'm
company.
hearing such resilience here and such willingness to lean in, like it's just profound.
Yeah.
Had you connected with online communities of women to multiples, like at all during this process?
No, I never did that because in my mind I thought I might lose my babies. So I only connected with that foundation I mentioned earlier.
So you didn't want to be around an online community that may have previously experienced loss or success, that you weren't sure which way your journey was headed? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I probably wasn't aware of support groups around loss at that stage, but I didn't want to connect with the other groups either, so I wasn't sure if our journey would end up going in that direction. But you mentioned earlier about the boys and telling them, and was around that stage they were asking, they knew there was triplets, but we were trying to explain there might be one, there might be two.
How did you explain that to them?
Very simple terms like that. We're just not sure how many we will take home. And they would ask, oh, how many? Is there going to be 3? Or we just said, we don't know, boys. We just have to wait and see.
Was that hard for you?
Yeah, it was hard explaining it to the boys.
Do you think that they got it?
No, I don't think so. They couldn't understand why we couldn't give them that definite answer. Yeah. But they were joking, so I don't think they could fully understand it. They kept on saying things like, I hope it's not three girls. We don't want girls in the house. If it is, I hope they all have a birthday cake each because I don't want to share it. So they didn't know at that stage.
Yeah. Or it could just be a genius way for them to help themselves learn.
Yeah.
And process it.
Yeah, through play and learning.
Yeah.
So where are we up to in your story? So you had said you had just connected, so you'd found this foundation with this beautiful woman who seems quite pivotal in your experience of support and how to connect you and possibly an invigorating sort of kick of inspiration, of hope of moving forwards. Would you say that's what this American woman provided through the...
Yeah, Mary was her name. She was amazing. She helps people worldwide.
And so she put you in contact with this specialist who was in the States and had rung you within an hour of you contacting him, had given you the advice that you were now following.
Yes.
Where are we up to now in your story? What happens next?
So this American doctor was just amazing. He would check in every week. He would ask what our scan measurements were and what was happening, and they were both such an amazing support. And we went in for a scan a few weeks after I'd started this new advice, and this syndrome doesn't self-resolve, but all of a sudden the girls' fluid levels had evened out a little bit. And
wow. Are you still doing your visualizations on evening out fluid at the same time as well?
Yes, yeah, I'd done a little bit of that. I hadn't done much of that before, but I thought, why not give it a go? And then my husband popped up and goes, oh, it's all the protein. And the doctors sort of looked at us like, what's the protein about? And we explained it, and he goes, oh, you might as well keep on doing it. It's not the advice here, but, it seems to be working. Why not? So we did continue on. And there was a joke every scan about the protein, and the scanning lady had got to know us and thought it was hilarious that we'd gone off and done this.
So how often are you having scans?
Every week at that stage.
And so are there changes between that first scan when those fluid levels started to even out? Are those changes continuing with each scan, or?
It's very, very small. So our little baby, for the first time, had some fluid in her bladder because she had no fluid in her sac. Her bladder had stopped filling up. So it was the first time we'd seen her bladder full on a scan, and we got a lovely ultrasound picture for the first time because there was some fluid around her. We had heaps of the other two, but not of Jade. And
did that feel so affirming and lovely for you?
It did. I thought, wow, there's lots of hope. Maybe she can make it through, but we're still given the same advice.
Which is what?
That it's not a great outcome.
What does that mean? Do they say it like that? It's not a great outcome, or do they speak more statistically?
It's a bit of statistics. So they'll say these are your odds.
Do you remember what those odds were?
So it was definitely Jade won't make it at that stage, and Asha very unsure of. And it was really if we will talk about survival after 24 weeks when we can talk about viability.
So they're not having any type of viability as you put it, viability is a horrendous word, but any type of viability conversations with you until post 24 weeks?
No, it was raised every week that this is what you need to get to. and that Jade also had growth restrictions, so she wasn't getting much of the placenta, and they explained even if she made it past 24 weeks, that growth-wise she probably wouldn't reach over the 500 grams to be viable and be able to be saved. So we were still at that point. But I was thinking in my head, oh, wow, that's like such a big improvement. There's a lot of hope there. But it's still, in their eyes, it wasn't enough to pull us through to a safe outcome. I think they were still worried it would progressively get worse. Usually, like within days, that syndrome can end up, killing babies. So it's not usually a journey like we had where things will settle down or even slightly improve.
So defying what they've seen previously at this point in time.
Yeah.
Are they beginning, at what point do they begin to acknowledge that? Like, is there a point at which they're now looking at you going, how is this happening? Or is it still touch and go?
After the 24-week mark, we reached that milestone, and that was an incredible
So what was that scan like?
To know that 2 of the babies had reached over the required weight was just incredible.
Wow.
But, it still could have all changed overnight.
So were you constantly living with the fear of this might be my last day with this baby?
I think going into each scan was really such a nervous time because you just didn't know what to expect in that scan.
So you don't know if you're going there and seeing 3 heartbeats or not?
Yeah. And they were so good with us. It was the first thing they did. They'd jump straight in and find those 3 heartbeats and then go on and do their scans. But I think everyone was relieved each week. Yeah.
Because they're on this journey with you.
Yeah. Yeah, they were amazing. So, we reached the milestone of 24, but there's still a lot of risks around having a baby that young. But there's a chance.
So at this point, there's a chance you have 2 babies over the 500-gram weight limit.
Yes.
Call it that. But Jade's not.
Jade's not even close at that stage.
So what does that mean? What are they telling you about that?
So I think the discussions around Jade had just stopped at that stage.
Do you perceive that they'd given up hope on her, that they were waiting for the day when she would no longer have a heartbeat?
I think early on that was very clear that they thought she wouldn't make that week without a heartbeat. But I sort of in my head always thought we were fighting for 3. And it wasn't until our 28-week scan, which was the next major milestone because the outcomes at 28 weeks are amazing, Jade had grown to a viable weight. And it was the very first time they said, we're on a mission now to save Jade. And I remember just being really shocked because I was always on a mission to save her. I didn't realise we weren't on that mission. And, that was amazing.
So something big's happened between 24 to 28 weeks for Jade to have the growth to go from nowhere near to now she's viable.
Yeah, she's scraped through,
What do you think happened in that 4 weeks?
I don't think we know, but my husband will say it's all that protein. I don't think we can know.
Did you have any change in body feeling, in communication, in internal dialogue?
I think at that stage I had learnt about mindfulness the year before through my university studies. So I'd just been trying to look after myself and try to relax. And I think that I could keep myself calm helped us get through and help them get through. Feeling-wise, I couldn't feel the babies by that stage because they'd become so cramped. I couldn't feel kicks, so I really didn't know what was going on for them. It was a surprise each week. I went in for a scan.
That's so fascinating. I didn't realise that. So the space gets so tight, that their movement is restricted, or just the subtle. Okay, and the movements themselves are smaller, so the feelings you have are more subtle. Is that?
Yes, I couldn't pick up on them as well as I could early on.
Is your belly kind of a constant moving process?
It did have its wiggly days. There was arms and legs sticking out everywhere. But towards the end, I think one had pushed up really high into my body, like pushed up the lungs. I've heard they do push up all your organs into your body. So she was quite cramped and I couldn't really feel her. But things like breathing were a bit more
really hard.
difficult. Yeah. There was a few nights I sat on the couch just upright because I couldn't lay down in bed. So by the 28-week stage, I was thinking, I hope it's not too much longer.
Yeah. So are you still lying on your left side, having your protein and bed resting?
Yes. Yes. I made that decision from about 20 weeks, I think. So I spent 10 weeks doing a lot of bed rest.
So 28 weeks, here we are. What happens from here?
Yeah. So we were told our next major milestone would be 30 weeks. Great outcomes at that stage. And if we made it to 32, we were promised a party.
So now we're having conversations around birth. So you get to 28 weeks.
Yeah.
You find out that now they're rooting for Jade as well, which you didn't know about.
Yeah.
So what happens from here? Does the conversation now change from if we make it to this scan to how are we birthing these babies?
Yeah, so scans stepped up a lot. They were every few days. After that, I was travelling in to a hospital about 40 minutes away quite a few times a week. And the care we received was just amazing. They were so protective and so careful in how they managed the pregnancy from there on. And
what does that mean, they were so careful?
I think they knew that if anything happens, like if fluid levels changed, if growth stopped, they'll get those babies out straight away. Yeah, so we went in and...
So each time you're going in, are you going in potentially having babies?
I was hoping so, but...
So are you taking a hospital bag now with every one of these appointments after 28 weeks?
No, I didn't. I was a bit... I'm not that sort of person. I'm a bit unorganised. I go with the flow, but... yeah, it's just we went for a few more weeks and things just tracked along and stayed the same. Nothing got worse. There were other complications that could happen and they would have been straight out, but we were so lucky. And it did get to that 30, bit before 30 weeks, two of the girls had really stopped growing and the decision was made that they're better out than in. And I think I was ready at that stage too. Yeah, so
then what happens? How do we prepare for your birth?
So there wasn't much preparation. We went in late one day and we were told they'd be coming out the next morning. And I was a little bit glad I didn't have that huge notice. And we were told we'd get a call later that day because there was lots of organisational things from their end. They had to have 3 intensive care beds. They didn't really want to separate them to different hospitals, but that was also an option if there weren't beds on that morning. And they had a big team to organise to be in that room the next morning. So we did get the call and got it about 6 o'clock the night before and we were packing bags and ready to go in early the next morning. And I was still vomiting on the way to the hospital on the freeway.
And do you at this stage know if your babies are staying in the same hospital or not?
No, we didn't know till that morning.
And do you know what their care looks like as soon as they're taken from your belly? Were you prepared for what your birth would actually be and what would happen with your girls?
No, I had no idea what to expect until that morning. We hadn't even gone into discussions
on that morning. On that morning, what does it look like? You arrive at the hospital and they take you to a room to talk about what's going to happen. Is that how it played out?
We were told a little bit the day before what they were trying to organise and just told where to go, really. And we arrived into a room and an amazing doctor greeted us and explained it all. And I'm glad that we didn't know all of the details. I think he did it in a way to protect us as well.
What did he tell you?
So he just told us how the surgery would go
Which was
how
what?
they would. So he said there'll be a lot of people in the room, and he was right. It was a very crowded room.
How many people are in there?
So I had 2 people allocated to me. There was one whose job was just to pretty much record who was who and weights, and there was 2 doctors delivering them, and each baby had its own doctor and own nurse, and then there was somebody else there to support me as well. So there was lots of people. It was a very small room.
So he says there's lots of people. What else does he tell you?
And then we got into the risks that they have to do.
What were those that you were given?
That there was 2 placentas, and we're not sure if we can control your bleeding after they're delivered, and you might also end up in intensive care. So it was sort of talk through all the anaesthetic risks, and by that stage I was just so tired and sick. I just wanted to go ahead and get it done. Yeah.
And what about in terms of your babies? So he says they're birthed in a particular order?
No, we didn't go into any discussions around that.
What were your discussions in terms of once they're born, what happens with them? Did you have any around that?
I think I knew they'd go straight off to the intensive care unit. We were prepared for that. And because they'd been sick the whole pregnancy, we knew that was an expected outcome. So that was good. We were prepared in that way. They were born, and
what was that like? So you're being wheeled in. What's happening in your head? You're about to birth your 3 babies.
Yeah, I was still sick in the operating theatre.
Oh, God, you poor thing.
And, yeah, I didn't get a quick glance when they were born. So Asher was born first, and then Sophie, the single baby, and then Jade. So I still can't quite figure out the order and why the 2 identicals in the same sack came differently. I'm not sure why that was.
What's the time difference between each one being born?
It was a minute. So they were out very, very quickly and over to their little stations. They had a station.
And what are you feeling in your body? Because this is your first experience of a Caesar as well.
Yeah. It was a scary experience for me. I don't like needles, and just trying to get the spinal anaesthetic in took a long time, and I didn't know what to expect once I was born. So I guess at that stage I wasn't really thinking.
So you're surviving the experience? Are you feeling
I think so.
The tugging, the movements, is any of that scary for you?
Yeah, it was a lot of tugging. It felt like there was 2 people jumping on top of me. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't painful, but it was just a funny feeling.
Were you hearing much as this was happening?
No, it was fairly quiet for all the people in there. Everyone was on a mission and had their role.
Are they talking to you about the babies? We've now pulled out blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, they talked me through when they were pulling each one out, and they briefly went on to some breathing support, and then I think one of them, Asha, the firstborn, got to come over to me for about 3 seconds or so. They quickly brought her over and then put her back on her breathing support, but that was really lovely to get a quick glimpse of her. And then, I was trying to look at the placenta too, because I'd heard so much about this placenta and how strange it was. So that was kept.
Great.
With your twins, do you mean? With the two girls?
Yes. Yeah.
Twins isn't the right word, I'm sure. What's the fraternal or paternal? What's the... No, that's just with twins.
So fraternal is...
when they share one?
Is separate.
Oh, separate. Okay.
Yeah.
So with the 2 girls that were sharing the placenta, what made that placenta so amazing?
Just the doctors did bring up photos after they were born to the room to show me just the blood vessels and how little Jade was getting and how much Asher was getting, and just seeing it, you could really visualise how restricted she was. So, they were taken off and I was given time to recover.
So did you have bleeding complications?
No, it went
afterwards?
perfectly.
So how are you feeling? You're in the theatre. It's scary and unknown with all the tugging and the people doing things with your body that you've not experienced before.
Yeah.
Where are you at? And then your babies are whisked out of the surgery where you are?
Yes, they were.
So your husband with you or the babies?
He had quickly gone off with the babies. So he
you're
got
now
to walk with them back to the NICU, to the intensive care unit. I'd been out in recovery by that stage when my husband left. And I still can't remember at that stage what I was feeling. It was survival time at that stage. I think it was a huge relief to have them out. Definitely thought they were safer out than in because it was a bit more controlled then.
So you didn't have any bleeding?
It was like a normal pregnancy. Yeah.
So you're
really
stitched
lucky.
up again within kind of 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah, it was a really quick process.
Yeah. And then you're in recovery on your own?
Yeah, it was very quick again. I was taken up to my room and my husband was back pretty much by the time I was in the room with some photos of the girls. And yeah, I got to see them for the first time. And I was so keen to get up there, but I was in so much pain at that stage I couldn't get up there straight away. Yeah, so I think I got up there later that night. They were born very early in the morning and I got up there about dinner time to see them for the first time.
How was that?
Yeah, it was amazing seeing them. They were just so tiny, so little.
How did you feel seeing them? What was going on for you?
I just couldn't believe that they'd made it that far. But it was so scary at the same time as well. They're so little and they had just cords and breathing things all over them. But I was just, even to get to that stage, I was happy because that wasn't an option for us. So
had you heard anything yet about how they each were?
that was the first time I got updates, but I don't think I was in the headspace at that stage to be absorbing. Like, I was confusing what was wrong with each one, and it probably was a couple of days later that it all started to process it and sink in. I think I was still running on adrenaline and at that stage.
Were you planning to express at any point or breastfeed, or was that kind of never going to be an option?
I hadn't thought past their birth at all. I had not thought about it. It was a nurse, once I'd gone back to my room, that said, "Oh, you need to start expressing for the girls." So they fed them down tubes and getting that first feed into them, they wanted to do that really quickly. So, I definitely had to go along with the flow. I couldn't have gone into that journey with things pre-planned. But, I definitely didn't allow myself to think past their birth.
So when you're processing then, so in this couple of days post their birth, are you focused more on your recovery? Do you get to see them very much? Is there anything that stands out in your mind about that time, or does it all feel fairly kind of foggy?
It's fairly foggy. I don't think I was focusing on myself at that stage at all. My visits were around taking milk to the girls every few hours. So I'd express.
So you are expressing.
I'm expressing. It's a big thing to try and express in the NICU. It's really important for the baby's survival, just to get that breast milk into them. It's easier for them to digest since they've got really immature bowels. So
are you sore? How are you going actually physically managing that post-surgery?
I wasn't sore at that stage, but I think I probably was, and not picking up on it, running off of a lot of adrenaline still at that stage. I was just getting in my wheelchair, and I think by a day I'd started walking up there, not using the wheelchair anymore. I was on a bit of a mission to go and visit them. So my trips were taking the milk up to them and visiting them all, and then going back to the room, having a bit of a rest, and going back and forward doing that all through the day.
Is that more exhausting, or do you feel better than being pregnant?
Oh, much better. It was instant relief.
Isn't that interesting?
To get them out,
So even this like incredibly difficult scenario, in some ways is still a relief from where you were.
Yes. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, the pregnancy was a tough time. I don't think I could have done it for many more weeks. But once they were out, yeah, I felt amazing.
And what statistics are you being given on the girls at this point in time?
So we weren't told statistics, I think, because I didn't realise. I thought once they were born, our journey would be over. I knew there'd be complications from premature birth, but I didn't really understand what that would look like. But we're on to phase 2 of our journey. Which was surviving their NICU stay. And I don't think they can tell you how your journey's going to look because it's so different for everybody. So we had Jade, our little one, was just doing amazing, and I thought she'd struggle the most.
Are they in separate cribs, or do they at any point be together, or how does that look?
They were in separate rooms, so we really had to take whatever spots we could get.
Yeah.
One was in one room and 2 were in another, and I remember a few parents pulling me aside saying, you know, that's really wrong and they should all be together.
How do you feel?
But at that stage, I was just really grateful we were in the same hospital. They could have been spread all over the state. I've heard of babies being split into different states. So
wow.
I was, incredibly grateful we had them in one hospital. So Jade was doing amazing, and then the other 2 were struggling a bit more, and that was because they were that little bit healthier and not ready to be born yet, whereas Jade had struggled along. So she was prepared to come out and
have that extra help.
Yeah.
That's so interesting, isn't it? That her adversity in the end was what created the perfect environment for her to thrive.
Yes.
That's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jade was also born sticking up her finger again.
Was she really?
She was.
Sounds like a firecracker.
It's like she was born and said, I showed you I could do it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and she's still got a very stubborn streak to her to this day.
So the other 2 girls are struggling?
Yeah, so
what are you being told about their health?
So I did get a call. I think the first day they were born, Asha had a collapsed lung, which is called a pneumothorax, and that they'd already done the operation, like a chest drain to release all the pressure, and incubated her for her breathing. And at that stage, I just wasn't too phased by it all. We'd already been through so much. I didn't quite understand how serious that was. And yet she bounced back so quickly. She was off of everything within 5 days and just on a little bit of breathing support. But she's done amazing from that journey. Sophie was struggling a bit with breathing too. But at that stage they said Asha was the most serious. And once again, I didn't quite know what our outcomes would be. But she bounced back really quickly.
In your body, do you still feel like it's okay?
What do you mean by that? Sorry.
Well, just through your pregnancy, you had this kind of sense of there's still hope. They can still do this. They're strong enough. We're from strong stock. Just this kind of mental background chatter that's focused on the strength as opposed to the weakness. Do you sort of maintain that background chatter through the process of them being in NICU?
Yeah, I think at that stage we were in survival mode and thought, they'll be okay, they'll be fine. Probably down the track we've looked back on it and thought, oh, wow, that was a bit of a journey. They were very, very lucky. But in that moment, there was just so much going on. Yeah, but we're incredibly lucky looking back on the journey. Yeah.
What makes you say that you were incredibly lucky?
I think just to get to the point they were born, we were incredibly, incredibly lucky. And then for them to have complication after they were born. So they were in hospital for about 3 months after their birth, which is pretty stock standard for a premature birth. And
How long are you in hospital for?
so I was in for about 2-3 days. So
home.
as soon as I born, they started preparing you for that. They said you'll be very upset the day you have to go, and there's just not facilities to stay on. Yeah.
How was that day you had to go?
Honestly, I didn't have that strong emotion. I think I was just so incredibly grateful that they were in the hands of the medicals that could help them survive. It was horrible running in and out and trying to juggle that with boys. But
How did you juggle that? What did that look like?
I got into a very set routine where boys would go to school. I would go straight into the hospital for the day. Then I'd be back by home time. At this stage, hubby was still working because we needed to save that leave when they came home. So it was very structured. We were able to call across at any time and ask questions how they were doing. And it was a bit of a daily ritual. Take all the milk in, hope for good news when you arrived.
And so are you expressing sort of every 3 hours around the clock at this point to
Yes.
keep your milk up?
Yeah.
So you're waking up during the night?
Yeah, so even though the babies are in hospital, I was still awake at night expressing.
How long did you do that for?
I lasted about 3 months.
It's an incredibly long time.
That's a really long time. To feed 3 babies.
Yeah, I was really lucky that we had a good milk supply to go round to 3 to last that long.
Wow.
Yeah.
What sort of support or challenge is your relationship going through?
Look, I think we're lucky we're so connected, but it was a juggling act. So I guess there was a time where we were a little bit separated because he was at work and trying to run home to kids, and he was also trying to get in there and visit on his way home. And it's probably really tough on him finding the time to pop in and visit as well.
Is that what he would do? So you would be home for school pickup and he would go to the girls after work?
Yeah, he'd go on the way home and give them a bath or spend his time with them. But I was so lucky I had a supportive partner. Just helped us become stronger through that journey.
So when you say really connected, does that mean that you're maintaining lots of communication?
Yes. Yeah. And a good sense of humour as well along the way. Yeah.
And support networks around you, what's happening?
There's lots of support in the hospital for parents of premature babies in the way of social workers and, everybody chipped in, and people we least expected, like people we'd only met a few times through kids' sports and school mums, and everyone was dropping us off meals or helping run around our other kids. There was always someone out to help my husband. So we were so lucky. And some of those people, we'd only met a few times and are now like our lifelong friends. It was the people you'd least expect that stepped up. Yeah.
It's a big story.
Yeah.
What are your takeaway messages from your very profound life journey?
I think it's just so important to trust your intuition. So, I knew something wasn't quite right during that pregnancy. It's just so important for other people out there to be aware too, if they've got multiples that are identical, that they should be getting really regular scans. And a lot of people aren't aware of that, even professionals. But everything I don't feel right with, if I get that gut feeling with my kids, and it's been several medical things since I was born too that just didn't feel quite right, and I have had checked, and the intuition's always right.
No one knows your babies better than you.
Yeah. So just advocating for them and just thinking, you can't give up hope. If there's a little glimmer, you've got to go with that.
So for another mum that might be going through any version of a multiple birth, what advice would you give her?
Well, if their babies are sharing a placenta, it's just so important they get early scans from 12 weeks. There's not that big gap. They should be getting them every 2 weeks at least. And that's not well-known knowledge here in Australia, but just so important that they should be looking out for this syndrome. It could save their babies' lives. So very important to get specialist care too.
To find the right people.
Yeah, you've got to have a specialist obstetrician in that area, which is your major local hospitals you should be going to.
And in terms of finding support groups online, you've given us the links, which we'll put in the show notes. Those, I think you gave us 3 foundations. They were pivotal in your experience?
Yeah, so there's the Miracle Babies Foundation who support families for premature birth and sick babies, and also the Little Aussie Prems Foundation who support premature babies. So they did amazing things like support groups linking us with other families who we've also made lifelong friends with. And they did little financial things like drop us off supplies and nappies and got us through that time in hospital where we weren't prepared. They would always be dropping off a little package for us. And then the twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome that I mentioned earlier was just, I think they changed our outcome. They're amazing, and American organisation that supports people around the world. She was still sending us resources and books from overseas once the girls were born. So their support, even after birth, was just amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have there been any books that you found, or documentaries, whatever you want to call it, that you found particularly moving, pivotal, or worthwhile as a resource?
Mary sent us a book on intensive care, which just helped us through our journey. It was a great resource in the end. We knew what to expect. There's a little TED talk on premature birth. It's a TED talk that relates to finding Nemo and just keeping on swimming and just explaining that journey. So that might be really helpful for anyone going through a premature birth and just helping families understand their journey and the supports they'd need once they're home as well.
And if you could have a billboard anywhere on any major highway in the world, what would yours say?
I think through this journey we've learnt that we're stronger than we think we are. So I think that would be mine.
You're stronger than you think you are?
Yeah, just, you dig deep down and find all this strength that you knew you didn't have. And just watching all the families we were with too, they were going through some really horrendous times, but everyone was just so strong and had so much hope. But I guess it's okay to also ask for help as well if you need it and aren't as strong as you think you are. We had so many people helping us, and without those supports, I don't think we'd still be here smiling and laughing at this point. Yeah.
And here you are with your triplets who are 2.
Yes.
And tearing
causing
into cupboards.
chaos.
How are they at 2? What's life with 2-year-old triplets like?
It's a lot busier now. So the newborn stage was quite easy compared to 2-year-olds. It was a bit of a routine of changing nappies and feeding. Now at 2, very independent, all wanting to put things away themselves and very time consuming.
With the triplet babies, when they came home, are you feeding them all at the same time, changing them all at the same time?
We had them come home staggered, which was nice. It eased us into it. So one came home and then another one came home about 5 days later, and then one came home a month after that, the smallest one. So, 2 were on the same routine and one was on another routine. So we were a bit around the clock, but it worked. It allowed us to feed 2 with 2 hands and then when they went back to sleep, we'd do the other one.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. You learn to multitask really quickly.
Were you tired during that time?
Yeah, look, it was when they first came home. I remember my husband saying, I wish we could send one back. It's a lot harder work with the third.
I bet it is.
Yeah, so just those early, probably the first 3 months of them being at home, it was around the clock overnight, and the small one required a lot of feeding quite regularly, so we're up to her a lot.
How long did your husband have off work at that time?
So he saved his long service leave and had about 3 months.
Oh, thank God.
gosh.
Yes.
How amazing.
Yeah. But there was still some nights we were both up with the 3.
Yeah. What did your boys think of it all?
They thought it was a bit chaotic. They love them now, but at the beginning they were so good through it all. I thought they might react quite badly or find it really difficult. There was mornings they were woken up by them, and they were so good about it. But my youngest son wasn't quite thrilled with them initially, and he's come around a lot. They're both so patient and lovely with them.
And here you are.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, Megan.
Yeah, thank you for having me and letting me tell our story.
And you have a Facebook page that you've shared your journey with your triplets on. And if anyone wants to get in contact with you or perhaps ask questions or guidance, can they reach you through that?
Yeah, they can. We set up a page through Facebook called The Adventures of the Temby Triplets. And we really just were sharing photos and milestones like walking and all the exciting things with our friends and family. But yeah, more than happy for anyone with any questions to reach out to us or join that page.
Thanks so much, Megan.
Thank you.
No worries.
So we really hope you enjoyed that interview with Megan, mum to triplets. All of the links she suggested are in the show notes, including the Facebook page where you can get in touch with her. If you yourself are on that journey or have a friend who is, please share this episode so that we can get the information out there and connect some mums on some pretty big journeys. You can get in touch with us at nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Instagram and Facebook. Bridget is at suburbansandcastles.com and you can check out her events to see what's happening. I'm at thepleasurenutritionist.com. And remember, you've got to nourish the mother to rock the family. And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This year, the Wellness Summit returns.
I realised in this time that I couldn't keep waiting for love from other people. I couldn't keep expecting love from other sources. But I had to give that to myself.
Yanni says, I don't care if everyone says that the kitchen is the woman's world. He says, I'm going to prepare food. I love my own cheese. I love my own wine. I don't care what you think of my new flat screen TV. He just loves company.
I started asking myself more often, what do I want? Such a simple question, isn't it? But when you think that, and I'm sure all of you sitting there, when you think that, something springs into your mind. And there's something there that you want that you haven't been doing for yourself.
Brett Hill and Marcus Pearce feature at the 2018 Wellness Summit. Bigger and better than ever. Tickets on sale Friday, May 4 at thewellnesssummit.com.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.